by the multi-specialty group that she's in. And how do you like this? They tax the family doctors to pay the salaries for their hospitalists in the group.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I cannot believe that we've lost so much ground. That's our plight. And she's making less money now than she made when she started practicing 10 years ago.
That is, I mean, it's flabbergasting. I mean, that is.
It is.
So, then you are exactly on, right on for why we're looking to do this. And again, the idea is that we want to connect young voices and young leaders who are just getting into the profession with some of those folks and try to instill and reinvigorate that mentality a little bit. So I guess I'd ask you, I think, and you've already started to articulate this, if you can think back to the earliest parts of kind of the beginnings of the profession, do you recall the feeling, the dreams, and the hopes that you felt with family practice from the start?
As a matter of fact, here comes my puppy. That's big. Let you in here. I can actually. Let me tell you a little quick story, and it sort of leads to that. When I was in my early 30s, if barely 30, which was really unusual in those days, I found myself president of the North Carolina Academy of General Practice in those days. And as I went around, I became a leader, or sort of became known within the academy as one who pushed education, because I was, to be honest with you, in the first couple of meetings I went to the academy, I was absolutely shocked and really so disappointed at the quality of the meeting they had and the things they were talking about. And I mean, essentially, with some old men smoking cigars and drinking liquor, pinching each other's wife on the ass and going home, and that was the academy. And I thought, I've got to get a different group. I mean, I've got to go and specialize. I did a rotating internship down at Emory Grady Hospital, and in those days you got invited to do a residency, and I had been invited in 3 different disciplines to do a residency with them: internal medicine, orthopedics, and OBGYN. But I decided to get my Navy obligation out of the way, so I did that instead. So I was still trying to find my place, and I really loved the concept of the generalist position. But I was about ready, and I shared this with 2 doctors that were young at that time and wanting to make a different organization for it. They said, "Oh, please don't leave. This is going to be a different thing. This general practice is probably going to go away, but there's going to be something to take its place." And it wasn't many years until they were talking about the specialty of family medicine. And just that aspiration that what was good about general practice could be saved, and yet could be made to fit in the new paradigm of specialization of medicine that was sweeping the country, was really intriguing to me. And so, but realizing that at least this state in those days of the 60s, North Carolina was still in its heart and soul a rural place. And so I asked for the academy to do a survey for me about who was practicing and where. And it turns out that, as intuitive as it seemed, was true, that most general practitioners practice in rural areas. But the amazing fact was that they were at that time in their late 50s, which meant in 10 years years, they would all be gone, and there would be no one. And that set me on a flight to start learning about this new specialty of family medicine that was going to preserve all of the things that was good about the generalist approach to practicing medicine. And I went on a voyage with the holy pulpit of the Academy of Family Physicians or General Practitioners in this state. And North Carolina was a good state for that because the legislators related to, because they all had a general practitioner back home with the majority of them, because the majority of them were rural people sitting in the legislature. But I went to the University of North Carolina first, and they just virtually threw me out. And then I went, and I was really disappointed. I still have the same grudge against Chapel Hill because my assessment of them is that they're only sort of accidental in North Carolina. They pedal so hard to keep up with you, which they will never do. that they simply don't pay attention to who pays their salary. It's tax-supported school, and yet they really pursue goals other than supporting the people of North Carolina, in my judgment, at any rate. But then I went to the private schools. I'm a graduate of Wake Forest, so you probably remember it, and it didn't get much better there, and certainly virtue was laughed at it too. So I set about to make some difference about it. But here was the thing about income-wise. I was not, when I tried to look at what was good about what I was doing, I was not the lowest paid doctors. Pediatricians, psychiatrists, several other physicians made a lot less than I did because I did orthopedics.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of surgical things, procedures, delivered babies. I delivered 250 babies my first full year in practice. It was at the beginning of Vietnam and the mentality of the Marine, which is where I was located in Jacksonville. They left their wives pregnant so they wouldn't screw around. And there were no doctors at the base, so the corpsman took care of them until about 7 months, and then they sent them into town. And there were just a few of us that did OB, and so I stayed. Obviously, didn't get much sleep, but made a lot of money, and I love that about practice. And so I thought if we could institutionalize what we did and be rewarded for it and appreciated, which is just as important as being rewarded, in my judgment. If we could be appreciated and valued for what we did, what we contributed to the health of the public, then that was what I had hoped that the new specialty would be, and so that was why I really dedicated myself, my whole thing. When I went to East Carolina to take that job, which I really did not want, I really enjoyed being a practitioner. That was my identity. I thought more highly of medical educators than to think I could be one of them. And I really did everything I could to keep getting that job, and only agreed to do it for 2 years. Ended up staying 20, but so much for that. But the thought was we really should try to preserve all that was good, and the good was that in my practice partner, I had just one partner, a guy that was finished second or third in my class academically at Wake Forest, just brilliant person. And I give him more credit than I give myself. When we each practiced solo for a year in a different town, and then joined together, and I was a little bit intimidated, although I was a good student. I certainly was not first in the class, and a little bit intimidated at first by having to practice with this guy, but I found interestingly that I found him off-base about as many times he found me off-base. But we made a pact when we came together that we would each, since family medicine was, or general practice was such a broad discipline, we would each take 5 topics of our own choosing, and we would be responsible for following the development in those 5 disciplines. And what people always approach me is, you can't keep up with medicine. Well, my challenge to them is to say, how many absolutely new things come out of medicine that are totally new concepts, totally new science? Like, for instance, one that always stands out in my mind is we used to tease that asthma was a hyperactive airway disease until we learned what the truth was about it. And so we changed that paradigm. So how many absolutely brand new things are there in a year's time? At the very most, there are 5 or 6 absolutely new things. I can manage 5 or 6 new concepts. So it's not as an awesome task as educators and students have made it out to be to keep up with medicine. So Tom and I each did that, and our practice was, and again, I give him more credit than I give myself because we the South Carolina broke. I was like I was then and still am to a degree, sit on go all the time. Mm-hmm. Tom would go, Jim, we promised that we would spend an hour teaching the reviewing. And so each day, I would say 85% of the time, and that's a conservative estimate, we would sit there for an hour after and we had to check out to the other person because one of us was on call every other night. So he would have to check out the patients in the hospital because we took care of our own patients, both in the emergency room and the hospital. And after we would check out the patients, we would then review the literature in those 5 topics that we had each decided to follow. And that was totally manageable, and we did that for, again, thanks to Tom more than me. And we did that for the 14 years that we practiced together.
Wow.
And so, and I maintain to this day, while we were busy and efficient, we saw up to 40 patients a day, but typically saw more than 25
wow.
to 30. Come here, puppy. What are you doing? What are you doing? Aaron, excuse me just one moment.
Sure, take your time.
I'm having trouble with my puppy.
About this journey before. They know exactly what it's going to be.
As a puppy, and he went off and left him, and he's just wrecking the place. So anyway, so I had dreamed that we would do this same sort of thing, that we would always stay well informed, and that we would be compensated for that, and valued for that. And I guess that's what really is disappointing me most over time. And I guess I personally feel bad because several of these things I personally had opportunity to make the difference. And for instance, in RBRVS, the Harvard study.
Oh yeah,
about reimbursing that. I was the representative at the table for family medicine after it became a specialty. And to the credit of the gentleman, Dr. but anyway, he at the Harvard School of Public Health, he really wanted to change medicine so that the generalist was the foundation of our healthcare system and was paid and respected accordingly. But it didn't work out that way, and so I in some ways I feel that I personally failed to achieve that. But actually, it was a sad thing is that I was able to persuade the people at the table that family medicine should be rewarded better. When they would field test it, the family doctor would say, "Oh no, we don't need to make that much money. We don't need to be paid that much for this procedure, that procedure."
Wow. So that formula for the relative value based back in '89, the goal was to some degree to increase incentives for general care.
Absolutely. Bill Chow, the author of that, the guy who got the grant and persuaded the AMA and the federal government to fund that study, he really was a champion for the generalist physician, especially for the family doc. I mean, he and I came to be friends. He came down to East Carolina and spoke for me down there from North Carolina several times. But he just eventually then the first people to abort the process was the American College of Surgeons, and then after that they when it went to Washington, they bastardized the whole thing. It never really quite achieved what he had wanted it to do. So, but again, it was my job to come away from the table with all I could get for family medicine, and it didn't happen. So, people said, that I couldn't do it. And, if you go back and look at those studies, when they took something that I persuaded them to do in terms of the value and effort, background, difficulty of practice, and all the components that the formula valued, took that to the field tested. The family doctors were the ones who came back. So after a while, I wasn't as credible as I had been at the beginning. So.
Wow.
But the people that were worse than me were the pediatricians, and the absolute worst was the gal that was there representing geriatrics. I mean, to this day, she's solely responsible for the fact that geriatrics is so poorly compensated.
Wow.
Because I tried to make them understand how much of an effort it was to go to a nursing home, to stop your practice in your office, to go to a nursing home, to see a patient where there was no laboratory, no ancillary facilities to get studies. You had to wait to the person it gets in line at the hospital to have those studies done, and you go back to the office and wait. Then you go back after hours and see that person with those results. I mean, that effort, there's virtually no specialty that puts in the kind of effort that a geriatrician puts in without being rewarded for it. I mean, it just, and then you have those family conferences for which there was no compensation and so forth. But this gal just poo-pooed all the things that I worked for. So.
Wow.
So anyway, some aspirations were that primarily that we would, same exact thing that you would say that you want out of family medicine. You want to be respected and you want to be compensated. Some people would put those in the reverse, but that's essentially what it is. If we could solve those two problems now, people would flock to family medicine.
Some of the things I heard you say as you're telling your story, which this is really enjoyable for me. So I thank you for sharing this. What I heard you say is, when you look back, you thought about ways to formalize or institutionalize the things that we do well, and you'd mentioned health of the public, having kind of a multidiscipline approach. As you saw the specialty coming together, and you think back to 1969, 70, as this was coming together, what do you think was kind of the defining feature of family medicine? What did you see as being kind of that hope for the new specialty?
Say that again now. What, in terms of what I personally thought, or what?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess as you said, you said, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, and it sounds like it has a chance to really take all of the good out of what we were doing from general practice. And
Right.
what would you say if you could think, kind of the hope that as the specialty was forming, what was kind of the
Right.
hope about what that would do to the healthcare system, or the hope in that new specialty?
Oh, I hoped that, I don't know if you know, but the reason I left the University of East Carolina was the governor appointed me head of the Health Planning Commission, which was health reform that the Clintons had failed in the 90s to bring it about. And what I got out of working at the state government was, we're the only civilized country that does not have as its base of its healthcare system generalist physicians. Yeah, I know you can't name me a single system that works, or any of whether it's the German system, the Canadian system, whatever. There's an acceptance that the base of the system should be a well-trained generalist physician. Barbara Starfield's research over and over again has proven that the best health for an individual is not to have access to a lot of different specialties. That there's no credible research that I know of that shows that people live longer or in better health if they're treated exclusively by specialists. Conversely, Barbara Starfield and a couple of other people have research that shows that if you have a generalist physician and you have early, easy access to that generalist physician and they oversee your health care, that's the best chance for good health and longevity. It just, I stand to be corrected if there's research out there in recent years that proves differently, but all the research done for you says that that's the best you can do. And so I'd hope that our system would value us as the basis of the system. When I was on the Harvard study, one of the things that I was absolutely enamored with was to have them review the Canadian system for me. And I don't know if they've changed in recent years. I've been told that they didn't, but they used to essentially lock. They went province by province, but they used to essentially lock the decision makers up for a long weekend. And they said, this is how much the budget is for health care. You guys decide how to spend it. And they would negotiate who got what, and that's how it was spent. And then they drew a line, and when the money was out, that was it. Now, it led to some hard choices, which I don't think there's political will in this country to do. The state of Oregon has done it 3 or 4 times, and it's been ruled unconstitutional. But it's just we could do it. There just is not a political will to do it in this country. And now specialists make so much money, and they're so ingrained, and insurance companies have supported that kind of a system that I have little hope that until it collapses, that it's ever going to correct itself.
Wow. So I take it then, and I would agree with you that the achievements that we've probably really missed on, at least right now, are having that value and respect, and certainly compensation at the center of the system. And so I agree with you on that. And it's something, as you're saying all these things, and it's getting to really feel like these are themes that are kind of returning and really, really kind of continuing to play out. And the same conversations I imagine you could have had in past decades are ones that are still kind of being discussed right now. I guess one of my thoughts would be on a positive note, as you look back into the 70s and the 80s and perhaps the 90s, what are the achievements for family medicine that you think you would be proud of, or things that we've done really well?
Well, where we've been allowed to, we have demonstrated that we can make a difference in the education of medical students. And I do give the people at Chapel Hill credit for this, and to a lesser degree at Duke, but in Wake Forest. But Carolina and University of North Carolina Chapel Hill have proven that family medicine has something valuable to teach all doctors. One of the most one of the things that I value most about looking back on my career is they're currently a group of people are trying to put together an endowed professorship for me in East Carolina.
Wow.
That happens to be headed by a neurosurgeon who was a student of mine. Now, on the surface, you would think the person furthest away from appreciating what family medicine has to offer medical education would be a neurosurgeon. And this guy stood up and made the most beautiful presentation when he got together a bunch of people the other day to kick off the fundraiser. He said, I got a letter from East Carolina several months ago, asking me to help endow a professorship for the person who was chairman of surgery when I was a student. I got to thinking about that, and I thought, Walter Porres didn't make me the doctor I am today. It was Jim Jones.
Wow.
And while I didn't become a family doctor, he taught me that the patient should be the center of medical care. It's he and his faculty that taught me what I value most about what I do as a physician. My heart it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps here listening to this.
So to have a neurosurgeon say that, and then I've been told that, Aaron, over and over again, is that I didn't become a family doctor, but I do try to practice medicine in a way that you'd be proud of the way I do it.
Wow.
And so I think that we have made a difference. We've proven that we can. And at the time, we had the longest required clerkship in family medicine in the country. And so, when it's paid dividends, I was at the philosophy that you admit the right students and you teach them the right stuff, they're more likely to become family doctors. You can't take the son of a cardiac surgeon in Brooklyn and teach him to practice family medicine in Chico Bend, North Carolina. It just not going to happen. But so that if you capitalize the right things, I think that we made a valuable input into the kinds of physicians that practice. And I think that we've improved with the Graham Center and other places that we can hold our own in doing meaningful research. First, what we call with sociology kind of research that we did, but I think that there's been some valuable contributions and some philosophies that came out of the research done by family physicians. The whole business of physician burnout and that sort of thing, that the importance of faith basis for practice medicine. Several of those concepts were all sparked by research done by family doctors.
The theme that you pointed out just about education and about placing the patient at the center is one that it seems like a lot of the different founders that we've talked to, and we're up to about maybe a dozen folks that we've talked to so far, but that seems to be kind of the prominent one that they said, up until that time in the 70s, educating students wasn't as much of a priority, and that family medicine really, really excelled in that regard. And that was the one thread I'll say that, as you're commenting on it, that it seems like everyone has been most proud of is training and teaching and educating, and the academic component of family medicine is what folks seem to be most proud of in terms of our achievement that I've heard so far.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
I think it is. That seems to be one real common thread. I would agree with you that there is concern about at least as I talk to folks about, our evaluation and where we are. But there is also a thought that just from an attitude standpoint, or how we approach being family doctors, that there's been a change too. And one of the things that I've heard kind of repeatedly has been this idea that, at least it's perceived, and maybe you feel differently, that family medicine was a bit of a counterculture thing at the start, and that it kind of grew out of the counterculture movement in America in the 60s, and that family medicine was kind of this something different that was, a response to institutional specialty groups. Did you feel that early on? Does that sound accurate?
I'm chuckling. I can't believe you said I'm chuckling, because one of my goals when I became president of AAFP was to try to get every major medical school in the country to have a department or division of family medicine. In the first city that I tackled was Chicago. At that time, there were 5 schools in the city.
Uh-huh.
And I remember being really angry when I left the dean of University of Chicago's office. He said what you just said. He said, Jim, you need to acknowledge the fact that family medicine got off to a good start as a specialty, primarily because of what you just said, a counterculture thing.
Huh.
And that people, it pricked the consciousness of medical students, and that's when the brighter people went into family medicine. But that quickly gave way to the reality that doesn't pay the bills and so forth. And I was really insulted by that, and that's all we are, is just a movement, a Bernie Sanders kind of thing. Of a movement that's going to die out when some other philosophy comes along. But the more I've thought about it over time, he was right. I mean, at one time there were a group of policy wonks in Washington. Virtually every agency that had to do with healthcare funding of any kind, from education to practice, were family docs. Bob Graham, that worked with us, had been head of HRSA, and you can just rattle off the names of about 5 of them that held those. That were the chief staff person for those major committees of Congress, or the major institutions in Washington. They were all family docs. And there were people like Bob Graham who were bright as crap, who never really wanted to practice medicine, but they knew they could jump to the front of the line if they had a medical degree. And they did, and at least 5 or 6 of them became head of all those agencies, the chief staff person of all those major agencies. Which is amazing. If you look back, I think the history will bear me out.
So, in a big way, then you'd say, and I would maybe suggest then that it may have had this kind of counterculture movement, if you will, and then at some point, once you've got members in all the government agencies, and you're starting to spread out, and you have departments in every different medical school essentially in the country, outside of about 9 right now, then you're no longer counterculture, you are kind of institutional, I guess, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what's going on in our presidential race right now. That's exactly what's going on. I mean, Hillary Clinton, aside from her personal problems, she represents the same old, and people are tired of it. And
yep.
I think that's exactly right. We've now become part of the culture. Yeah.
So if you were to, as you think back of where we were and where we are right now, what are areas that you think would benefit from kind of redirection or refocusing?
I think I agree with the practical approach that I think certainly practitioners would tout, and that is reimbursement needs to be more equitable. Neurosurgeons general practitioners. They're not ashamed to call their people general practitioners, incidentally. But anyway, but they don't make 20 times as much or 10 times as much. They make more, but they don't make more. Canada has never had less than 50% of their graduating medical students go into, at least 50% of them have always gone into family medicine. And that's because there's not this wide reimbursement gap. I mean, there are probably other reasons too, but the most obvious one to an outsider like myself looking in has been that they're fairly equitably compensated compared to the subspecialists. And I think until you address that issue, the rest of it is just sort of, window dressing and picking around the edge. And then, but I think equally important is you have to be appreciated. I mean, people have to really honor you. I feel so bad, and I could sit here and make myself cry when I listen to Michelle come home, how she's pleaded. Her group is a multi-specialty group, very large. But they're run by administrators, and it's not Michelle who tells them what they really don't want to hear, the importance of having access for primary care in all the different areas of the dog is set up in there because he broke the juice. So she comes home and it just pours her heart out, and no one really pays attention to her because they just really don't agree with the value of what she and the primary care people bring.
Wow.
The people that are treated even worse than she are the pediatricians. I mean, if I was a pediatrician right now, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, they're just really, the fact that if you look at what medical education is and everything, they've worked so hard not to accept who we are. They created another specialty, med-peds.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what is that? It's a family doctor without any adequate training in behavioral health. It's what So anyway, I just feel so sorry as I watch her have to fight with these people who seem not to have any feel for what patients matter. And again, it just come back to what the neurosurgeon said. I mean, I guarantee that Van Husband puts his patients first as a neurosurgeon. And that's because of the influence of the Department of Family Medicine. Incidentally, the truth of the matter, and I think Michelle probably is the first one to capture this, but now the current dean and other people say it about East Carolina, it was a tension between me and the first dean about what kind of school that was going to be. That really made East Carolina the school that graduates now a larger percentage of its class in family medicine than any other.
Than anyone else, right?
Yeah, but you know what happened? The dean, I was hired a few months before the dean of the school was, when they were still going through the accreditation. And I got pressured into taking that job, which as I said earlier, I didn't want, because I had led the family physicians to come out in opposition to what was sweeping the state politically, was to not have the school. Duke, Carolina, and Wake Forest all said there should just be one state-supported school, and that should be at Chapel Hill. But when after I got that survey I told you about earlier, and I tried to get the schools to do that, I realized that they weren't going to. The best chance we had to fill that gap would be to have a new school with a different orientation. Well, the dean was hired, and he did not want me to become chairman of the department. I was hired to start a residency program over there. And the president of the UNC system had urged me not to join them because they said he didn't trust him. And I told him, well, I didn't trust him either. So well, I was young and full of piss and vinegar, so it made good press to call the dean at Duke get accredited unless he had a chairman of his major department, supposed to be his major department. So he made me acting chairman. And so after he had drug every possible candidate through there, when they got there and found out I was there, I said, what the hell am I doing here? You're already here. So they would withdraw from the search. And, but finally, the search committee, the accreditation committee came, and they were good. I thought, oh, crud. And it was the dean at Brown University. I thought, oh, my God. what chance do I have to persuade this committee that's headed by the dean of an Ivy League school to grant a school that's supposed to emphasize primary care? Well, I didn't get invited to even present. I had written what I thought the school should be, but the first curriculum that they presented to that accreditation committee, I'll kiss your butt on the Capitol steps if it even had the word family medicine in it, let alone any significant part of the curriculum. So I never will forget. They were there 2.5 days. They were going to leave at noon on the third day. At 10 o'clock, I had not been invited to present to them at all.
Wow.
I thought, well, the dean's had his heyday. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. We'd gone at each other several times. But I wouldn't. When they called me a warrior, I guess that was it. I really would not back down for it. Because I didn't. I figured that I had a choice when I went over there. I could either look after my own hide or I could look after the discipline. So I prioritized things this way. My first priority would be to protect the discipline of this new discipline of family medicine.
Wow.
Second, to prioritize after that would be my own department. And third, my own academic career. That tells you how much I valued my academic career. I didn't really, but if they fired me, they'd be like throwing me back in the briar patch, right? Because that's where I wanted to be anyway. So it wasn't as noble as it sounds. So that's the way I did business. And so I remember that I wasn't invited. And I thought, oh, well, I may as well either. I had a choice either. I'm going to go public and say what's happening down here, or the cause is lost. And so I was plotting my course, and I got a call that says the accreditation committee wants to see you. Well, I hadn't been on any list, so I went over, and they asked me some pretty penetrating questions for a while, and then the head of search committee, this dean from Brown University, went over and closed the door, and he said, we ask you these questions, Dr. Jones, because we've read what you have written. We just wanted to make sure that you were legit, and you are.
Wow.
And I don't know what this committee is going to do, but I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and if they don't want to join me, I'll send it as a minority report. This school should not be accredited unless you have a major role in the future of this school, because otherwise there's no reason for the state of North Carolina to spend the money to have a second state-supported schools unless it does what you articulated. And that's what I'm going to say. And if I were you, I'd ask for even more than you were asking for. So I got out my notepad and started writing everything the dean wrote on the board.
Sounds like that was probably the opposite of what you expected, right?
And that was how it came about. In fact, that committee joined that dean Brown, and that was their report, that if they did not make me a permanent member of the curriculum committee and the admissions committee, that the school should not be accredited.
Wow.
And that gave family practice. So everybody thought I had the easiest job in the world. That was not true. I mean, I did that just because, really, I didn't want the job. But the truth was that I just stood up and just said it. It was more important that this discipline, if it had a chance, it had to be that kind of school. Eventually, the dean and I made up, and we actually became good friends in the end. But it was a tug of war between the two of us, and about what the school was going to be. And I don't know if he lied deliberately or just didn't understand why
As you think back on the early days of family medicine, and you think back, going back to 69 or 70, who are there any folks that we should be reaching out to, or any other, when you think of kind of the founders of the profession, or folks that were really something, are there people that I should be calling or trying to get in touch with?
Well, several of them have died, unfortunately. But you touched on a lot of the big ones. They're I have the same problem that most of people might have. They can't always remember names, but I can put together some names and get in touch with you about them. But there were a lot of people. There were not, for instance, the guy down at the University of Miami, looking at his name right now, but he's the guy who hasn't been properly credited with. He's the one who came up with the concept of the Family Medicine Center, Lynn Carmichael.
Ah.
And Lynn, I went down to work with Lynn, and I understood why he was so unpopular. I mean, his residence reflected what he did. He was a guy, I live in the South, I got up and put on my tie and suit, and he said, "What in the hell are you doing? Take that off." And, he looked like a missionary going down to community center at South Dade County with a purse slung over his shoulder and shorts on and so forth. And when I met with his residents, I said, "My God, one resident looked like Snoopy with an aviator cap on. That one flap went up, one flap went down." And I thought, these are the doctors that I thought we were going to be training. My God, but Lynn Carmichael was a genius. I mean, he was just absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
And he's the guy who came up with the concept of a center like the Family Medicine Center that you would get to practice before you went into practice. There are just a lot of guys like that stand out in my mind. Burnett in South Carolina, Hiram Curry, who was bored to 3 different specialists, was another giant in those days and taught how to put together academic departments. And his faculty member that went up and took over the University of Virginia. And then on the West Coast, there was John Guyman, Ted, somebody that was at the University of Washington. So there are a lot of guys that were around. The guy at the University of Maryland and then the University of Florida. There were several of those guys. Nick, did you mention Nick Svanis was one participated in Rochester. Had a great program that really influenced the Duke program because the leadership that made Duke back when it was real family medicine, they all came out of the Rochester program. So there are a lot of people like that, but then there's some other giants like Nick that started the American Board of Family Practice, and
Tom Lehman?
No, not Tom Lehman. Tom Stern, who really led the academy to become strong as an education entity, and he was actually the real life Marcus Welby. Was a guy named Tom Stern who took over the Division of Education at the AFP and made it into a high-class educational experience for people.
Do you know if he's still alive, or has he passed?
And so was Nick. Nick, who was the guy who started the American Board of Family Practice. Tizicano, who was out of South Philadelphia. Brad actually was on the faculty at one of the Philadelphia schools, Holman maybe, or Jefferson one, and was actually in the Department of Internal Medicine. I remember that I got at odds with him, and he ended up disliking me a great deal. But But I got at odds with him because he really, really made a move to merge general and internal medicine and family medicine into one discipline. And he wanted family medicine to become, I don't know what he would have called them, but I remember I've gotten a lot of accolades for speaking, but the longest standing ovation I ever got was I delivered an address to the Organization for Residency Program Directors in the country one time, in which I refuted his argument that we should merge, and that would be the worst thing that could happen to American medicine and to American healthcare system for us to become general interns.
Wow.
Happily, I mean, the reaction, he was there and he saw the reaction, and he sort of realized his fight was over at that time. But, so, when I say I've had my hands on the plow, some went well, some didn't go so well, but I've been blessed. God has been good.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think you really hit a lot of the thoughts and visions that I've been looking to ask for, and this is really, you gave me a lot of 5 pages of notes, so I have a lot to go through here. I'll tell you from where I am, I'm going to kind of consolidate some of the things we talked about into something brief, just a short little response. And
are you going to be at the annual meeting of the Academy?
I'm going to try like heck to be there.
Maybe we can touch base there then.
I'd like that. I was talking to Greg just a couple weeks back. I got married 3 months ago.
Oh, congratulations.
And my wife is an intern at Portsmouth Naval Hospital in emergency medicine.
Oh, wow, good.
So I've been doing everything to try to support her because it's her intern year. So all the bets are off as far as I've been trying to just really be there for her for everything that she needs as an going through residency herself.
Right.
But life is wonderful my way. I was actually just reflecting.
That's good for you. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you very much. I'm actually quite amazed. If you recall, at the silent auction, or not silent, it was more of it was a vocal auction that we did, that you saved my hide when I was up on stage and nobody was bidding for the bidding for.
I was not going to let you. I did let you squirm a little bit.
Man, I was really squirming up there. Nobody was moving, and you really saved my hide. And I can't believe, as I'm reflecting, that's been almost 2 years. That was. I mean, here in December, that'll be 2 years. I just can't believe. That feels like it was yesterday for me.
It does, doesn't it? When you get older, so it seems shorter and shorter.
I had one of my patients tell me the other day, he said, I hope you enjoy marriage. I'll let you know. The hardest part about marriage is that the first 50 years goes by so fast.
Exactly. That's sweet. That is so sweet. That's true. Speaking of which, my wife just came in, so I better get off the phone. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's good to touch base with you.
Hey, you too. Say hi to Michelle for me, please.
I'll do it.
Thank you so much. You take care.